All right, well, the time is 9 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call our meeting to order. Everybody go ahead and make their way in, that'd be great. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our first guest speaker, David Cross.
I love this sign. I absolutely love this sign, and I got to tell you folks, my son and I drove up here. I live down in Gwinnett County. My son and I drove up here today, and he and I were sharing, kind of the same thoughts this morning on the way up, which is that we are so excited that Donald Trump is president of the United States right now. I'm walking on air every morning. I'm walking on air every morning when I go into my business, because I feel like I see a brighter future. I see somebody who's fighting, to right the wrongs of the last 40 years of us shipping our jobs overseas, of really gutting the middle class America. And I see somebody who's hopefully going to be able to restore the American dream, to our younger generations that are out there, and make it so that they actually have got a shot. So again, my name's David Cross. I'm currently your second vice chair at the Georgia GOP, and you're absolutely right, Jeff. You got to eat the mic on this thing. I'm currently your second vice chair, and as the second vice chair, it's been a challenge to be involved in the Georgia GOP. I got to be perfectly honest with you. I went to an event up in Cherokee County a few weeks ago, and as I was checking in, the person that was talking to me said, she was trying to give me a name badge with credentials. And she said, well, you can just put your Georgia GOP business card in there. Well, I don't have a Georgia GOP business card. And she said, well, you can just wear your Georgia GOP name badge. I don't have a Georgia GOP name badge. So there's some, we've got to do some unity work inside the party. We've got to really get folks engaged as far as leadership goes, and we've got to treat everybody with respect. If I am elected as your chairman, we need to have a strategic structure going forward. You're going to hear a lot of talk about keeping the A team, on the field right now. And the issue that we're dealing with right now is that our star quarterback is in Washington, D.C. He's not coming back to Georgia in 2026. We've got to elect all of our constitutional officers, from the governor to the lieutenant governor to the attorney general and on down. We've got a lot of work to do. And as it stands right now, the momentum is in Washington, D.C. In order to counter that, we're going to have to create our very own Trump Force 47, a clone of it, so that we can get out there and do that. It's going to take membership engagement across the state, from every corner of the state, and it's going to take growth in those ranks. We're going to have to get Republicans from everywhere engaged, whether they're Latino Republicans or Chinese Republicans, or in Duluth, Georgia, we've got a ton of Korean Republicans. And a little sidebar for a second, do you know that Duluth, Georgia, outside of Seoul, Korea, the number one most dense population of people from South Korea is Duluth, Georgia, outside of Seoul, Korea. We have huge opportunities out there. These people share our values. They share our belief in God and in Christ. They are just like us. They look a little bit different, but they share our values. As far as the strategic structure going forward, one of the most important things that I think that we need to do at the Georgia GOP is we need accountability. We need an audit. We need to know where the money's going to, or where it's coming from and where it's going to. That's why I'm so excited about DOGE here, and why I'm so excited about DOGE in the United States. Do y'all know that right now Elon Musk is finding $4 billion per day of waste? That doesn't sound like very much, but it's $12.50 for every single person that's alive in the United States right now. Per day is what he's finding. Over the course of a year, it adds up to real money. All right. So one of the other things that's been put out there too is that I am calling for an audit, and the chairman's going to tell you that it's an election year stunt, and that all the information is available for you out there. All the financial information is available for you. I'm going to read to you a quote from our treasurer, who happens to be my CPA, Laurie McLean. She said, "The Georgia GOP treasurer has virtually no role in overseeing or managing party finances. She doesn't have access. Our treasurer at the Georgia GOP is the custodian of funds." The custodian means that that person is supposed to have access to all the information and supposed to have control over the bank accounts. She doesn't have that. She's a CPA. She's my CPA, and she's my friend. And I hate to see her being put in danger like that. We're also told that the information is out there. It's freely available, you know? All right, I'm in the financial services business. I read financial reports as part of my work. I've tried to go to transparency.usa to get the information. I've tried to go to the ethics website for Georgia, to the FEC, to the Federal Election Commission, to pull this information down. It would take me an entire afternoon to just create one report, for 1 year. And I don't know about y'all, but I imagine y'all are probably a little bit more busy than wanting to spend your afternoon trying to put together a financial report. We need transparency. If we have transparency, it's going to help build trust. Now, in 2023, you're going to be told that the executive board, and the state committee was asked, do y'all want to have an audit? Okay, and it is true. He did. Our chairman did ask if we want to have an audit, and it is true that nobody raised their hand to vote for it. What you don't know is the fact is that in the 5 minutes prior to that, we were told that if we did an audit, that it's going to look like there's something suspicious, there's something wrong, there's something going on, and that donors are not going to trust us if we do this. So basically, there was poison put into the lemonade, and then you were asked, do you want to drink some lemonade? All right? That doesn't work. We've got to be honest and transparent. Now, I'm going to take a sidebar for a second and remind everybody here, because I had this discussion with my son on the way up here about this position as chairman of the party. He was looking at it like it's like an elected office, okay? Like a statewide elected office. And he was trying to give me some feedback on, maybe what people are thinking. And I had to remind him that the position I'm running for as chairman of the party, it's not a statewide elected position. It's not a politician's job. Our current chairman is a politician. He was an accomplished, politician. But this position is, I am running to be president of your club, okay? To be president of your club. What that means is that you need to have somebody that's in charge that understands how to leverage resources, how to build teams, how to have people work together, how to manage money. You don't need somebody that's a slick politician. I'm not going to come across as a slick politician, all right? In my business with managing my clients' money, I sometimes have to have hard conversations with people and tell them, here's where you are in your financial plan for retirement. Here's where we want to get to when you get to retirement. And I sometimes have to have difficult conversations with people and tell them, you're going to have to cut back on your spending. You're going to have to say no to some things so that you can get to that point in the future. I'm in the business of telling people the truth. And I'm not a polished politician. I'm not up here to try and wow you with all the political things that I've done. I run a very successful business where I oversee over $100 million of my clients' money. People come to me, sometimes they come to me with everything they've got, everything that they've accumulated in their life and their career. And my job is to oversee that. And I sometimes have to have difficult, frank conversations with people to tell them what's going on. You need somebody who's willing to be transparent, tell the truth, and sometimes give you challenging news. But I'm also in the business of helping people figure out how are we going to overcome those obstacles. The most recent legislative session that we just came through, my friend Garland Favorito was going to be here. He and I got to be friends back on November 5th of 2020. I went home that night, like a lot of y'all did, thinking, what on earth is happening to our election? And my wife was in the bathtub. I was sitting on my couch in my bedroom, and I was thinking, what are we going to do? And she said, there's this guy named Garland Favorito with this thing called Voter GA. You should give him a call. It was 10:30 at night. Garland's not a spring chicken, okay? But he answered the phone, and we developed a relationship. And we went on a journey together to try and figure out what is going on with our...
Sorry.
What happened?
Is the battery not?
Hello? Oh, it's back again. All right. That's a little finicky. What happened? We went on a journey together to try and figure out what happened. And on that journey, when it first started out, I thought 6 months. It'll take 6 months for us to do the investigation and figure out how the dirty Democrats, rigged the election. What we found out was that there's about 14 different ways to rig an election with our current system right now. In 2021 and 2022, I spent a huge amount of time and effort and resources trying to figure out what happened. I reached out to our elected officials down at the Gold Dome. I was frequently pilloried, and made fun of as being one of those conspiracy theory people. The machines are not connected to the internet, okay? Tulsi Gabbard, a couple days ago, came out and said, we know that they're connected to the internet. We know that there are flaws. We know that these things are not working properly. And a little over, I think about 6 weeks ago, President Trump signed an executive order that said, paper ballots. We need paper ballots. In our most recent legislative session, we failed to get that across the line. None of that passed. Nothing of any consequence for election security passed in the most recent session. Now, I'm not going to cast blame or anything like that, but I think that we can have a more organized, better way to do this. Rather than having just one person who is representing the Georgia GOP, I think it would be better if we took 20 people from across the state and organized them into lobbyist teams, because a lot of these bills are going to be put forth by anywhere from 4 to 20 politicians, or representatives, senators and representatives. If we have those teams put together, we can divide and conquer. Our current lobbyist has to split his time between the Georgia GOP, and other competing interests of folks that he's working for. I don't hold that against him. He's a hard-working guy. He's extraordinary, at what he does. But I think it would be wonderful if we're able to leverage that and be able to have talking points for each one of those people to have our own lobbyist group down there. A legislative scorecard is something that's important to me. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when I think about Ronald Reagan, I identify with what he said. Republicans are for smaller government, lower taxes, and less regulation, all right? I think that we should be scoring our representatives on how they're voting on those things. If they're not voting for those things, then we're going to have some conversations with those folks and say, we really need for you to pick up the ball and run towards the goalpost with those ideas in mind. In order to do all of the things that we need to do across the state, I already told you that we don't have a Trump Force 47. We need to have a clone. The way that that's going to happen is if we increase membership. Across the state, we need to have 100,000 people that are willing to give $25 a month to the Georgia GOP. It might be a different number, but something, it's basically a keep the lights on fund to make it so that we have the resources to be able to do what we need to do so that we're not constantly having to go and ask some of our bigger donors to give us operational money. Operational money is something that we should be able to bring in from the general membership. Big donors like to give towards big ideas, big initiatives. As far as growing the membership, we've got to help keep people informed. I don't know about y'all, but every week I think I get 4 or 5 emails that come in that give me a little blurb about maybe something that's going on, maybe with Georgia, maybe it's nationally, but at the bottom there's a little red button that says donate here. I donate already. I gave a couple $1,000s to the Georgia GOP last year. What did I get for it? All right. I didn't even get a pat on the head. All right. I got more of a kick in the ass. All right. That's not the way that we need to be treating our donors and our leadership. I want to keep people informed. I want to make it so that when you are out, in Jackson County or Walton County or Peach County, you've got my phone number. You have direct access to either me or the rest of the executive committee. We've got to have direct access to leadership. Thank you. All right, hopefully I'm not going to spill it on your computer. That would be that'd be a total disaster. I want to make it so that you feel like you've got direct access to leadership. Having that direct access to leadership is going to make it so that you're able to go out and tell the story to your friends, to your neighbors, to your family members. Hey, I've got a voice in this, in this thing. It's not just coming from the top down. I feel like I'm able to put my voice in and move it from the bottom up. I want to keep you informed, as I said before, rather than sending you emails that are asking you for money every week. I would like to send you one email each week that tells you what are our successes, what are our challenges, and what can you do to help move the needle in the right direction. I'd also like to do a podcast. That's something that our chairman said he was going to do last time. I can appreciate that things got busy, but the thing is that a podcast is going to be an audio version with additional details that you're not going to find in the email that goes out. A podcast is going to be for people that are driving on the road that don't have time to sit down and go through all the details. You're going to be able to listen to 40 minutes of what's happening and what you can do to help move things. Podcasts are also going to be attractive to to younger people out there. As it stands right now, Joe Rogan went from being the guy that got people to eat nasty things on TV, to having hundreds of millions of people that are watching him every day. He moved the needle for President Trump by having him on his show. There's no question about it. We need to be able to do the same thing. The podcast doesn't need to be just me or just leadership. We can have special guests on to be able to address our members. We need to have events that are meaningful. A couple weeks ago, Laura Trump came in town. That was wonderful. I think it's amazing that we're able to have folks come to something like that. There were 300 people in the room, and that's wonderful too. If I was your chairman, I would make sure that if we had speakers of consequence that could come in town, I'm going to have them to events in northern Georgia, in southern Georgia, and in the Atlanta area. I'm going to open it up and make it so that if you guys want to come, if anybody wants to come that's a general member, the cost to attend an event like that is going to be something like maybe $40, all right? Enough to cover the cost of the airline chicken and the mashed potatoes, all right? It's not about the $40, all right? The $40, to have somebody come in like that, that's not your fundraising effort. That's covering your cost for an event like that. What can be truly fantastic about something like that is that you're going to have 1,000 people at each one of those locations. We're going to have an opportunity to have sponsorships to come in that can market to people that are in their tribe the same way that I spend my marketing dollars on people that are in my tribe also. We've got to think bigger. We've got to be more inclusive. We've got to include young Republicans, people from other groups out there. My name is David Cross. I'm running to become your chairman, and I would appreciate your support. And if you have questions, please reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Thank you.
Sure. I'd like to go ahead and take, out of respect for everybody's time, Chairman McKoon will be up next, but I'd like to take 2 questions for Mr. Cross. Anybody have a question for Mr. Cross?
No questions.
All right, you did well.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We got one.
I have a suggestion, if you don't mind suggesting.
Sure.
We're asking about them. Some of the things to get involved with, in my opinion, are, you've got the young people out here. What's their booth?
Turning Point.
Turning Point. That's a very good, motivated group. They're also very technical, and I love that because I can't do technical. And so being on X, which is the #1, and having our own GOP site there with information, I think would be quite helpful, because it's the next generation that's also going to be brought up. And Charlie Kirk, a journalist who is Turning Point, would be good conversations to have.
I agree. I would love to have him, be able to come down here more often and be a speaker at some of our events. I think that would be transformational, particularly with the younger crowd.
They're great volunteers.
Yes, they absolutely are.
They will. And there's your team of 20. They are highly motivated. They are a new upcoming, they are returning to Christ. So I think that would be a good suggestion.
And for anybody who doesn't know, that's a huge movement that's happening. My son has gotten really actively involved with the Catholic Church, and he is, it's amazing. We have great discussions, and and I feel like I learn a lot from him. And I think it's transformational. I'm excited for the future of what we're seeing with young people. Yes, sir.
And this is just a comment. One thing that I'm concerned about is I donate to a politician, and then all of a sudden I am bombarded with requests to donate this and this and this and this. So subsequently, I have stopped donating.
So I agree with you. On the drive out here, I think my phone pinged like 4 times, and it said, please read this message. It'll change your life. Or, hey, I've got a secret message for you, and be sure to click this. And it always takes you to WinRed or something like that.
Expired tolls that you got to pay.
Yeah, Listen, I agree with you. I mean, we have to be more engaging on the digital platform. Just like, what's your first name?
I'm Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie, just like Anne-Marie said, we have to be more engaging on the digital platform. If we're sending out messages like that, I would love to send something like short videos or memes or things that are funny or engaging, or just get people to be engaged. It can't
Don't send anything at all.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it can't always be about donate to this, donate to this, donate to this. I agree. All right,
We're good. Yeah.
You want to take one more?
One more quick one.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Are you currently doing any kind of podcast for somebody to keep up with you?
Am I currently what?
You do a podcast of any kind if I wanted to keep up, follow you?
I don't have one right this second, but it's something that I can do very easily, and I think I will be doing that. Running for chairman, it's I think Josh will tell you too. You're going to put thousands of miles on your car. You're going to see a lot of friendly faces out there. You're going to see people you haven't seen in a long time. But yeah, it takes a little bit of time to do it. But if as far as a podcast goes, one of the things I would love to do is it wouldn't just be the chairman show. It would be the chairman like one week, maybe the first vice chair the next week, maybe the over 80,000 rep the next week. I want to rotate it around. I want to have I want to have more views and more opinions, and just make it entertaining, and have some, it'd be fantastic to have Charlie Kirk or somebody like that come on and do a podcast with us too, and talk for like 30 or 40 minutes about what's going to move the needle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Appreciate
you so
it.
much. Thank you, David. We really appreciate it. A lot of great points there. Apologize for the microphone cutting out on you. That's what happens when you have Amazon batteries. For those, so apologies for that. We'll leave these batteries in there for Josh as well, so it's all fair. But thank you, a lot of good points. Speaking of that, I want to go ahead and thank Kathy Wortham for putting this together. So we're grateful both of you gentlemen coming. We know we had another speaker coming too, but thank you guys for coming. Thank you for being flexible, and thank you, Kathy, for reaching out to them and you guys being willing to jump in. So it's great. David made a great point about getting folks engaged, and in our county's at a tipping point. So for those who didn't attend the convention, the county convention, and I know Josh and David didn't because they were at their own, I'm sure, is Jackson County is actually the 5th fastest growing county in the nation. And you know what the other 4 are, or where they are? The Mexican border. And so Trump just changed that. So guess who became, by default, even though the fastest growing county in the nation is Jackson. So we are trying our best. Marty is working really hard with Christy and her husband, Creston and others to get our social media presence up. So I totally agree with you there. Thank you for that. Thank you for Kathy for pulling that together. Thank you, Marty, for all the work that you've done in the past. And I think that's what we as a county party bring together. And man, I am eating this microphone, is, bringing folks here that, want to attract more. And so our convention numbers were down. I mean, big time. Trump did an amazing job getting reelected. We hope we helped, but the truth is he carried his own water. We all know that. But the problem is after that happened, this is the next meeting after it, and we're down. And that's not complaining. Thank y'all for being here, but encourage your friends. Yes, it's spring break. That makes an impact too. But we've got a full committee now. I mean, we got to get this thing going because Ossoff's a problem, and we're the only ones that's going to fix it. So I say that. So Josh, I'm not eating into your time at all. Next, I want to thank another great speaker. Great job, David. Another great speaker, another great representative of our Republican values, Chairman Josh McKoon. If it dies, I will put in new batteries.
Yeah, I'll just get really loud.
There you go.
Thank y'all for having me. My name is Josh McKoon. I'm currently chairman of the Georgia Republican Party. It's great to be here. We were talking earlier, the last time I was here, y'all were set up out there. I think there was a cow show going on, and there were gates up and everything else. It was such a cool setup for a meeting, and the level of excitement and energy here really translated in the election. And that's really where I want to get started, because a little tip for those of you, when you get up in the morning, I'm not a big morning person. So one of the things I've started doing in the morning that really makes me sort of wake up with a smile is I will ask my smartphone, I'll say, hey Siri, who is President of the United States? And it starts off your day in a great way to hear that back. It's Donald J. Trump, But here in Jackson County, y'all really did your part. You won Jackson County in 2020 by a little over 21,000 votes. But in 2024, you improved that margin. You won by 26,000 votes, almost a 20% improvement. And in an election that we won by 115,000 votes, increasing the margin in this county alone by 5,000 votes, that's what did it. That's what made it possible. So thank you. I wanted to start there. I'm excited about where we are as the Georgia Republican Party. We have worked really, really hard. If you think about it, 2018, when Governor Kemp ran the first time, and Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight Action, the New Georgia Project, and all of that, he won by about 45,000 votes. And I'm sure those of you that were active at that time remember we had the recounts, we had all the litigation, we had her saying that the election was stolen. It was okay for a Democrat to say that. But we won the election. We got Governor Kemp over the finish line. We all know about 2020, but at the end of the day, the certified result in that election was about a 12,000 vote loss for us. In 2024, we turned this ship around. We won by 115,000 votes. We won by 115,000 votes in a state where Kamala Harris got more raw votes than Joe Biden did 4 years earlier. So think about what that performance was. We turned out the vote where we needed to win. And that's hugely important, right? Because it demonstrates, because people on the left were saying it's over. Georgia's a blue state. Greg Bluestein put out his book. He wrote the book. He called it Flipped. He didn't say flippable or flipping, right? But we demonstrated in 2024, Georgia is a center-right state. Republicans will win in Georgia as long as we stay united, as long as we stay focused on the basic blocking and tackling of politics, which is getting your people out to vote and making sure you have a fair election. So what did we do in 2024 that allowed us to be successful? The first thing we did is we had a great field program. Trump Force 47 did an amazing job in helping us turn out the vote. Now, if you dealt with a Trump Force 47 staff person, that person was a Georgia Republican Party employee. If you went to a Trump Force 47 office for a training or for a phone bank or to get ready for canvassing, those offices were leased by the Georgia Republican Party. So we leveraged the fact we had this once-in-a-generation candidate to rally people to our cause. That's why it was called Trump Force 47, but it was the Georgia Republican Party's field program. And we did something a little bit different in 2024 than we had done in prior elections. And that is, instead of focusing on the so-called swing voter, right? You have Republicans. We know everybody in this room is probably voting for the Republican every time. We've got Democrats. They're going to vote for the Democrat every time. We have these people in the middle. They turn out. Sometimes they vote for us. Sometimes they vote for them. We didn't focus on those voters as much in the 2024 election. We focused on a population of voters that had been identified through analyzing the data that don't turn out every time, but they're particularly activated by Donald Trump. We knew if we could get them to go vote, they would vote for Donald Trump. That's why we made such an emphasis on early voting, because we wanted to bank the votes of these so-called low propensity voters. So we worked on that. And with your help, we got over 4 million people in Georgia to vote before Election Day. That is an earthquake. That has not happened before. Only 5.2 million people voted in the election, so almost 80% voted early. That does two things. It guarantees we've got those votes in the bank for Donald Trump, but it also makes our final push to get out the vote much easier because you have fewer people you've got to push to the polls on Election Day. But here's what's truly shocking about what we achieved together. Over 800,000 of those 4 million people didn't vote in the 2020 election. They did not vote at all. That, to me, made the difference between winning and losing. So the field program was incredible. Our relationships with other groups, that was another huge difference maker. You heard a reference to Turning Point Action. Turning Point Action, Greater Georgia, Faith and Freedom Coalition, Tea Party Patriots. For the first time in a long time, we were approaching parity with the left in the number of other groups that were rowing in the same direction with us. And look, Turning Point Action, they're invested in Georgia. They got full-time field staff on the ground in Georgia in 2025, including Cooper Whitmire, who's here today. So having those relationships and being able to work well with those leaders contributed to our victory as well. Election integrity. We had the best election integrity program in America. I know you had Garland on your program for today, but Garland was quoted in the AJC about the 2024 legislative session as it being one of the strongest legislative sessions for election integrity in Georgia, because we have an amazing group. It's not one person, it's not me, it's not Brad Carver. There's an election confidence task force that's been working since Chairman Schaefer was there. Betsy serves on it too. And they do a great job getting key bills passed. Let me give you two quick examples. One was, in 2020, you could request an absentee ballot just by going on the computer and pushing some buttons. We got the law changed so that in 2024, you have to have a wet signature on an absentee ballot application to get an absentee ballot. And guess what the AJC wrote about the 2024 election? They had a headline, 374,000 voters vanish. Vanish. They did not vote in 2024. They voted by absentee ballot in 2020. That's what happens when you insist on fair election process. And in an election that was decided by 115,000 votes, that's important, right? That's important. We also got the law changed on ballot access for presidential candidates. In every Georgia election I could vote in for president, you had a Republican, a Democrat, and a Libertarian. It's fundamentally unfair to us because Libertarians draw disproportionately from Republicans. So we got the law changed. We got the law changed, and for the first time ever, we had the Green Party on the ballot, we had the Socialist Party on the ballot, we had Dr. Cornel West on the ballot. Guess how many votes those three candidates took together in the presidential election? 40,000 votes in an election that was decided by 115,000 votes. That's how you win elections. You look for the strategic ability to level the playing field so that we get treated the same, in this case, as the Democrats. And we have been able to, through our election integrity program, we hired more election integrity lawyers than we've ever hired before in the history of our party. We recruited and trained more volunteer attorneys than we ever have before in the history of our party. We had over 500 lawyers on call and available to help us with election integrity issues. We recruited, with your help, more poll watchers than we've ever had before in the history of the party. We covered more poll watching shifts than we ever had before in the history of the party. And you know what happens when you do that? We filed more lawsuits than we ever have in the history of the party on election integrity. We intervened in more litigation than we ever had before in the history of the party. And we won more of those lawsuits than we ever had before in the history of our party. And that's important for two reasons. One, we want a fair election, right? And so this makes sure that we have a fairer election process. But number two, what it does for people that told me as I was going to meetings like this one, and it happened at the meeting I came to here, I had somebody come up to me afterwards and say, Josh, I just think the election's rigged, I'm not going to vote. And when people saw how hard we were working with the Republican National Committee to have a fair election, they said, I'm willing to do this one more time. I see how hard the party is working to make sure that the election's going to be fair. I'm going to vote. And that helped us get the record turnout we needed to elect Donald Trump President of the United States. Now, not only did we do that, but we raised over $3 million on our own, Georgia Republican Party money. We got transfers from the RNC. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the relationship I've built with Michael Whatley and the confidence he has in our team. That allowed us to do a lot more. It allowed us to pay for Trump Force 47. It allowed us to do the direct mail program you saw that came from the Georgia Republican Party. Let's talk just a little bit beyond President Trump. We held every congressional seat that was held by Republicans going into 2024. And y'all know how thin the margin is in the U.S. House. That's the difference between President Trump's America First agenda being passed and President Trump being impeached again. That's holding on to those 9 congressional seats in Georgia. We did that together. We returned majorities to the State House and the State Senate. Out of Georgia's 159 counties, I already bragged on Jackson County, but over 130 of our 159 counties, we improved our margins. We shifted to the right in over 130 of 159 counties. That's an earthquake, y'all. There is a political party that is in the process of firing their chairman. It's not the Republican Party. The Democratic Party has passed a rule to eliminate Nikema Williams as their party chairman, a sitting member of Congress, a black female member of Congress, that John Ossoff does not want leading their party because we ate their lunch in 2024, okay? And so, to me, that's a pretty ringing endorsement of what we have accomplished together over the last year and a half. So what about 2026? 2026, we're facing two big challenges. That is, we got to fire Jon Ossoff. He's the most unqualified member of the United States Senate ever. I used to say, when I ran for chairman the last time, I would say Jon Ossoff and Senator Fetterman were the two most unqualified members of the United States Senate. I owe Senator Fetterman an apology. Jon Ossoff is horrible. He's horrible on every issue. He's essentially California's third senator, and if he wants to represent California, I suggest he move out there. But we need an America First Republican United States Senator from Georgia. President Trump needs the help. We have a 53-vote majority in the Senate that's built on Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski. So we got to have people that are passionate about advancing the president's agenda. That's very important. The other thing that's important is keeping the governor's mansion. You know, it's been 24 years, it'll be 24 years next year, that the Georgia governor's mansion has been controlled by the Republican Party. The last time there was a Democratic governor, Zell Miller was a United States Senator that was a Democrat. The Democrats that are seeking to replace us are not Zell Miller and they're not Sam Nunn. They're AOC clones. And we cannot afford that. Can y'all imagine what COVID would have been like with a far left governor of Georgia? The churches would have been closed. Everything but the liquor stores would have been closed in Georgia because they kept the liquor stores and the casinos open. We've got too much on the line, and the Republican Party is too important for us not to have the very best leadership we can have. And I'll be the first person to tell you, I'm not perfect. I'm human like everybody else. But I feel like we've got a really good team. I think we've done really well. I think the results speak for themselves. I will address a couple of things you heard earlier. This question about an audit of party finances. There's always a financial review conducted per our rules. In terms of having a full-blown audit or a forensic audit, that discussion was had 2 years ago before I was chairman. It is a discussion that is had every time somebody is trying to get elected chairman. And it is true, we had a meeting at the very first state executive committee meeting because I wanted to clear the air on this subject. And I said, I want a show of hands. Is there anybody in this room that wants us to pursue a forensic audit, an audit, any kind of review of the books at this time? And not a single hand went up. The problem with the Georgia Republican Party is not counting the money. The problem with the Georgia Republican Party is making sure we have enough of it, okay? It is really hard to raise political money. Some of y'all may be involved in charities and nonprofits. That's hard to raise money too. But when you're raising money for a political party, here's what you're asking. You're saying, will you give me some of your after-tax dollars so that I might be able to win an election and the government might get a little bit better? That's a hard pitch to make to people. And when you talk about throw around terms like politician and things like that, yes, I'm guilty of winning 4 elections for the state Senate. Yes, I'm guilty of being chairman of the Georgia Republican Party when we won the first federal statewide election we've won in 8 years. I'm proud of that. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed of being a state senator who took a salary of $17,000 a year and time away from my family and friends to try to make Georgia a more conservative place. You can go check my voting record. They did a 30-year study on members of the General Assembly. They ranked me as the second most conservative state senator during that 30-year period. Mike Crane was number 1, so I apologize. Mike is our current first vice chairman. I didn't make number 1, but I was number 2. As far as our treasurer goes, the Georgia Republican Party has operated largely the same way since I've been involved for the last 20 years, which is the chairman operates as the chief executive officer of the Georgia Republican Party, makes day-to-day decisions. When you're in the heat of a campaign, it is very difficult to make decisions by a 28-person committee. We absolutely have meetings. We absolutely keep people informed and involved in what we're doing. But as far as our treasurer goes, our treasurer is responsible for signing off on our campaign finance disclosures. And during the entire term, our treasurer, under penalty of perjury, has signed off on every campaign disclosure that has been filed with state and federal regulators. So the idea that there's something nefarious going on with party finances is absurd. It's frankly detrimental to the party. It makes it harder to raise money. And it's just dishonest. It's not true. When we talk about events, yes, we had Laura Trump come. I called Laura Trump and I said, we need to raise money because we always need to raise money. It's a never-ending process. You've always got to have financial resources to make the party go. And she was willing to come at my invitation. We raised over $300,000. I don't apologize for that. I don't apologize for asking people to sponsor at high levels because that is how you win elections. If you want a repeat of Trump Force 47, you have to raise the money to pay these people. Every initiative you have somebody talk about, think about any organization you're involved with. I don't care if it's a nonprofit. I don't care if it's a business. If it's going to make an impact, you've got to have the money to make it go. And that's why your chairman, whoever your chairman's going to be, has to have a specific set of skills. They have to be able to communicate. They have to be able to raise large sums of money. They have to be able to deal with our stakeholders. I'm not looking to divide up the Republican Party into people that I think are good Republicans and people that I think are not good enough Republicans. I'm not looking to go to war with our elected officials. I don't think your Republican state senator or your Republican state representative is the enemy of the people in this room. I think that Keisha Lance Bottoms and John Ossoff and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are the people we've got to be focused on. So you've got to have focus, you've got to have vision, you've got to have the ability to raise funds, you got to have the ability to bring people together. I'll just close by saying this. Charlie Kirk and Turning Point Action have endorsed me. Congressman Mike Collins and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene have endorsed me because they understand next year is a hugely important election. And if we have the wrong leadership in the Georgia Republican Party and we can't raise the money we need, during the time I've been chairman, the Arizona State Party had to sell their office building. The Michigan State Party went broke and wound up bringing in new leadership. We can't have that happen here. We cannot have that happen here. We need to take the positive momentum of the last 2 years, move it forward, and continue to win. And if we do that together, we're going to fire us off. We're going to elect a Republican governor. We're going to elect Republicans up and down the ballot. And we're going to continue the success that we have enjoyed over the last 2 years. My name is Josh McKoon. I would be honored to have your vote and support in Dalton for another term as the volunteer chairman of the Georgia Republican Party. Thank you.
So, 3 questions. I see 2 hands already. Marty?
Yeah, Josh, you said yourself, the Trump phenomenon was once in a lifetime. And we in the party on the board, we noticed a lot of interest, hyper interest during setting up for the election.
Can everybody hear
Got
Marty?
a lot of new people.
I can repeat it. I can repeat it.
Can you hear me? Anyway, we got a lot of people interested in the last election. And we've got their names. We're going to stay in touch with them in Jackson County. And what you just got through saying, we got to keep those people engaged because they went, oh, okay, we won. You know, we can't sit back. We got to keep these people and keep them in the loop. So is there that on your mind as a chairman?
Yes, sir. So the question is, how do we keep the voters, this unique population of voters that are primarily activated by Donald Trump, engaged? Because Donald Trump obviously won't be on the ballot next year. And this is something that I've had the opportunity to talk with both President Trump and his team about. One of the things that I think is of value in my leadership of the party, back in December of 2023, I had a meeting with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. It was supposed to be a 30-minute meeting. I was the first state party chair that he asked to meet with outside of the state of Florida. And we spent 2 hours and 45 minutes talking about how to win Georgia. I expected a much different experience. He was very curious about Georgia, wanted to know about the specific dynamics of our state. Obviously, the politics of our state are very unique. And he continues to be very interested in Georgia. But one of the ways that I think you keep those folks activated is by bringing people associated with President Trump and eventually President Trump himself back to Georgia to talk about how important that specifically the U.S. Senate race is. I think that is our opportunity to activate people to say, President Trump needs whoever our nominee is to be able to do what he needs to do for the final 2 years of his term. If you really want President Trump's agenda to be effective, you've got to get us our Republican senator from Georgia. I believe I have the relationship with President Trump to get him here with some frequency during the campaign, because there's a competition, right? When we had the presidential election, there were 7 swing states. Y'all probably noticed how often President Trump came to Georgia. And we would say, you know, we need you to come over to Savannah. We haven't had any coverage over there. We need the media over there. We need our people over there to get revved up. And the president was very willing when I would call on him, because I was strategic about when we would do it. He was willing to come in. Members of the Trump family are willing to come in. And so it's important to have that relationship, and the trust that's been built over the last 2 years. I mean, the president saw we were able, with our leadership, to deliver Georgia for him. And so I think that's a key. I think another key is we're going to have to model our voting universe to look for additional pockets of voters that maybe we wouldn't have spent as much time on in 2024, that we can make sure to get out in the midterm in 2026. We know it won't be as many voters. We know there are other things that are different about that population. So we've got to do all of those things. And that's where having experience in running winning campaigns matters in this job.
David?
Yes, Josh, I've been a delegate for over 16 years. I've been attending the state conventions. We elect our officers to take the seats. Once we leave the convention, we hear very little from the GOP. And I find that disappointing. I mean, we voted for a first chair. We lost our first chair. He was removed. I don't know if he was replaced or not, but he was removed. I know he was going all over the state to meet with different GOP counties to try to make sure that he heard their concerns and was going to address them. And I've talked with a number of the people who are state representatives of the GOP. And they don't have business cards. They don't have anything working for them. I mean, it's like one person running the show. And I don't find that to be what we voted for. And I'm trying to find out why is it that we have that situation going on. And I mean, I've voted for you in the past, and I've tried very hard to watch us grow in the right way. But I am very concerned with the party. I'm very disappointed when Brian Kemp set it up, his own funding, that took away a lot of funding on the GOP. I don't know what anybody has done to correct that, but I don't like our state legislators giving him that authority, because he's in competition with us. We're the ones that are out on the streets getting these people elected. And when he can go out, any corporation is going to give him the money before they give it to us, because he's the one giving them corporate benefits for taxation and bringing them to the state and different things. We needed that money to be able to help support our GOP. And I'm very concerned with what's going on. A lot of our state reps that we have put in place and state senators have undermined what we as a GOP have been working for years. And I'm looking for answers on that. And I'm just trying to get a feel for where you're at.
Go for it. And then we'll have one more with Debbie. But go for it.
So a lot of different issues that you're raising there. I'll certainly say we can always do more when it comes to communication. I believe that we have done a lot more communicating over the last year and a half than has been done by the state party in a long time. Not just fundraising appeals, but lots of information about events and what we're doing as a party. When it comes to the first vice chairman, Brian Pritchard, Brian, when he was elected, he came to me a few weeks later, told me, look, there's this complaint with the state elections board. It's been alleged that I voted illegally in 9 different Georgia elections. I want my day in court. A lot of people at that time, as they were learning that, were very upset and wanted action to be taken. I said, absolutely not. We're not going to do that. He has every right to make his case before a judge here in Georgia regarding these 9 potentially illegal votes that he was involved with. So we went through a process over about a year. He had his day in court. The judge issued a ruling, and in that ruling she said, Mr. Pritchard pled guilty to check forgery and some other crimes of financial dishonesty that were felonies in Pennsylvania. He was serving a sentence for those felonies at the time he voted in these 9 different Georgia elections. He signed under oath in those 9 different elections, the elector's oath that we all signed, saying that we're eligible to vote. And one of the things that you swear to there is that you're not currently serving a sentence for a felony conviction. And so the judge found that he had voted illegally on 9 separate occasions. So I privately asked Mr. Pritchard for the good interest of the Georgia Republican Party that he would resign from his office. Because this election, we were spending all of this time and effort, you heard David talk about it too, on the question of election integrity. How seriously are you going to be taken when you're talking about election integrity when you say, it's essential that everybody vote legally except the first vice chairman of the Georgia Republican Party, because we make a special exception for people that are on our side. That would have been the next year of the campaign. And so he refused. A complaint was brought. He was given a 32-day notice to prepare his defense to the allegation that what he was doing was detrimental to the interests of the Georgia Republican Party. A state committee meeting was convened. We have almost 200 people on our state committee. He had a lawyer present. He had the opportunity to bring witnesses, to offer evidence. We wound up being in a meeting all day, started at early in the morning, ended at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. And there was a vote taken of the state the state committee. 86.5% of the people that voted to remove Brian Pritchard. So that is what happened with regard to the first vice chairman being removed. With regard to the question about Governor Kemp and the leadership committees, when I was in the legislature, you can go check the record on this, there was an attempt by Governor Deal to pass a similar law. I voted against it. I didn't agree with it. I still don't agree with it. But the legislature passed that into law. Governor Kemp signed it. It's the law of our state. And you're correct. We are in a much more challenging fundraising environment because of that, which is why the person that occupies this role has an even tougher time raising scarce dollars. But even in this environment, we've gone from December 2023 having an event with J.D. Vance that raised roughly $125,000 to an event in April of this year with Laura Trump raising over $300,000. Now, how do you do that? You do that by building confidence among all of our stakeholders. So I'll certainly pledge to you, we will work even harder to do more communicating with our folks, but I think that the decisions that have been taken over the last year and a half have been well-considered decisions, and in the case of the first vice chairman, wasn't my decision. It was the decision of 86.5% of our state committee.
Debbie? Last one.
Thank you very much for being here. Got a little frog in my voice. My question has to do with the election integrity. And you said that we've made some great strides and you feel really good about the 2024 election and all the things that have been done. With Tulsi Gabbard recently coming out, talking about the machine's hackability, that there was fraud. And then with President Trump requesting that the states consider his I don't know if it's called a mandate, but his request that all the states go back to paper ballots. So my question is two-part. Do you feel like there was any fraud in 2024? And two, what are we going to do to follow through with President Trump's, to eliminate the election machines or at least to go to paper ballots and hand-counted votes?
I think every election you have fraudulent activity that occurs. That's why we put 500 lawyers out on the street. It's why we recruited more poll watchers than we ever had before. You'll never hear me say, as somebody that's run for office, as somebody that's helped others run for office, as someone who's served as an election law attorney, as someone who's filed election contests, that there's any such thing as a perfect election. What you are trying to do is get that number as close as you can to zero. I support President Trump's vision the Georgia Republican Party has been on record for 4 years now, I think since 2021, as taking the position of elimination of electronic voting machines, adoption of paper ballots that are hand-marked and hand-counted at the precinct level. That is the stated position of the Georgia Republican Party. What I will not do to get elected to this office is lie to you and say, if you elect me, I can wave a wand and make that happen. We're going to advocate for it. We're going to continue to advocate for it. But I will tell y'all, the fastest route, if you want the machines gone, is to identify, recruit, qualify, and elect a candidate for Secretary of State in 2026 who will decertify the machines. People that are serious about this issue, if this is your number one issue, that is the fastest way to make that happen, is to elect a Secretary of State, because he can go in or she can go in on the very first day and issue an order saying, under the law, I'm decertifying these machines. I'm saying they don't meet the standard under the official code of Georgia annotated. And then the legislature will then have to respond to that, as opposed to us trying to get a bill through the legislature removing the machines. So if we're talking about fastest way to address that problem, that's the fastest way to address that problem. The other thing I will say with regard to election integrity is we got a bill passed, House Bill 397, in the Senate. That contained most of our agenda items for 2025. A lot of the other issues we want to have. Partisan parity with poll workers. This is probably not an issue in Jackson County, but I can tell you in Fulton County, we recruited people not to do poll watching, but to actually work in the poll. And the Democrats that basically run the Fulton County Elections Office will say, well, we'll hire 9 Republicans and we'll hire 100 Democrats, right? So there are things like that in that bill that are hugely important. It's sitting over in the House Government Affairs Committee. We're going to work very hard to see that get passed in January. So I don't want anybody leaving here saying, McKoon says the election's perfect, there's no more work to be done on election integrity. We've got to continue our work in the legislature. We've got to rebuild the election integrity team just like we did in 2024 for the actual election. We've got to recruit the lawyers again. We've got to recruit the poll watchers again. We've got to do it all over again, because if they're given the opportunity, they will cheat. The Friday before the election in Fulton County, Friday night, when I saw those great early voting numbers, they did too. And so without a vote of the Board of Commissioners, without a vote of their Board of Elections, they threw open the doors to their election offices on Saturday and Sunday. And so we're going to take paper absentee ballots, just bring them in on Saturday and Sunday. And that's also in this bill. It would outlaw that practice. So there's always more to be done on that issue. We're going to continue to fight it. It's the reason I ran for Secretary of State in 2018. I cared deeply about having fair elections because it's the bedrock of our entire system. I think that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I have to say that I'm excited that we have 2 great candidates, frankly. I mean, it's far too often. For how long have we been suffering with terrible candidates between what the Democrats had to offer and what we had to offer as Republicans? So I'm excited that us as Republicans have gentlemen like this to offer, candidates that we have, and the Democrats have they, them. So I'm really excited that we have these great candidates. So I'd rather be sitting in this room than the other room, even though I do love powder blue. So go Heels. Anybody, I appreciate y'all all being here. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here and making the time. This is what you get to see at state, maybe a little bit at district, but really at state. So if you've never been before, I highly encourage you to do it. You can still sign up as a delegate when that information goes out, and we encourage you to go see it. And then maybe next year, we do a delegate. But like they both said, we have a lot of work to do. This is actually, Trump's going to come in and help, it sounds like, and that's amazing. But, we got a lot of work to do, folks. So thank y'all so much for being here today. Hope you enjoyed it. Tell your friends, and we'll see you next time in May.